There are places in this world that defy explanation. Places where the veil between what we know and what we fear grows thin, eventually tearing open to reveal a darkness we were never meant to see. Most people think of a haunted house as a place of creaking floorboards and flickering lights, but some houses aren't just haunted, they are hungry. They don't just host spirits, they consume lives. Tonight, we are stepping inside a structure that has become a monument to American terror. A house that doesn't just want you to leave, it wants to break you. This is the true story of the Sallie House in Atchison, Kansas, and the ancient, malevolent force that used the ghost of a child as its most lethal weapon. Before the screams began, before the blood was drawn, there was only a small town nestled beside the Missouri River. Atchison, Kansas, is a place of history and quiet charm, but in 1871, that charm was shattered within the walls of a modest two-story home. Dr. Charles Finney, a man dedicated to the preservation of life, faced a doctor's ultimate nightmare. A young girl named Sallie was rushed to his door, her body racked with the agonizing pain of acute appendicitis. In the 19th century, medicine was a brutal, desperate craft. There was no time for a hospital, no time for proper anesthesia. Dr. Finney laid the child on his own dining room table, the very place where his family shared their meals. He reached for his scalpel, his hand shaking as the girl's screams filled the house. But the surgery didn't save her. Sallie died on that table, her heart stopping under the cold steel of a blade meant to heal. Her last sensation was one of pure, unadulterated terror, and that terror became the foundation of the house's legacy. For over a century, the house waited. It passed through various owners, each reporting the faint echoes of a child's presence, the sound of small footsteps in the hallway, the scent of lilacs, a toy moved from one corner to another. It was a tragedy, yes, but it felt manageable. It felt like a lingering sadness. But in 1992, Tony and Deborah Pickman moved in, and the house decided it was tired of waiting. They were a young couple, glowing with the hope of a new beginning, unaware that they had just walked into a trap. At first, the phenomena seemed innocent. They would find their infant son's toys arranged in a circle, or hear a faint giggle coming from an empty nursery. They believed Sallie was a lonely child seeking a family. They felt sorry for her. They invited her in. That was their first mistake. You should never invite the shadows to play, because you have no idea what is hiding behind them. By 1993, the atmosphere in the house shifted from melancholic to predatory. The air grew heavy, thick with a scent that was no longer lilacs, but something metallic and rotting. The temperature would plummet in seconds, leaving frost on the windows in the middle of a Kansas summer. But the most disturbing change was directed solely at Tony. It began with a feeling of being watched, not by a curious child, but by something that loathed his very existence. One night, while Tony lay in bed, he felt a searing heat across his chest. When he flipped on the light, he found 3 deep, red scratches carved into his skin. They weren't the scratches of a child. They were jagged, angry, and deep. Over the next few months, these attacks became a daily occurrence. Tony was scratched, bitten, and pushed. He would wake up with bruises in the shape of handprints, far too large to belong to a young girl. The Pickmans brought in paranormal investigators, hoping for a way to cleanse their home. What those experts found changed the narrative of the Sallie House forever. During a recorded session, an investigator asked if there were any spirits present. The response didn't come in a child's whisper. It came as a guttural, low-frequency growl that vibrated through the floorboards. The investigators realized that Sallie wasn't the one attacking Tony. She was the bait. There was a second entity in the house, a dark, masculine energy that investigators described as demonic or elemental. This entity was using the image of a dead girl to lower the inhabitants' guard, lurking in the periphery of her innocent energy until it was strong enough to strike. It hated men with a primal, ancient fury. It saw Tony as an interloper, a rival, and it intended to drive him to the point of madness. The psychological warfare was even more devastating than the physical wounds. The entity would mimic Deborah's voice to lure Tony into dark rooms. It would whisper hideous things into his ear at night, promises of violence and despair. The house itself seemed to be changing, the hallway stretching, the shadows lengthening even when the sun was high. Tony became a shell of himself, his eyes sunken, his skin pale, his mind fracturing under the weight of constant surveillance by an invisible predator. The entity wasn't just in the house, it was in his head. It knew his fears. It knew his secrets. And it used them like a knife. The house was no longer a home. It was a feeding ground. The Pickmans eventually fled, leaving behind their belongings and their peace of mind. They realized that you cannot negotiate with a storm. But the story didn't end with their departure. The Sallie House became a mecca for the macabre. Countless teams have entered since, armed with cameras and sensors, only to be driven out by the same relentless hostility. There are recordings of voices that sound like a child crying for her mother, only to dissolve into a terrifying, inhuman roar. There are photos of black masses standing in doorways, tall and imposing, watching the living with a hunger that transcends time. Every person who enters the house reports the same heavy, suffocating pressure on their chest, a warning that they are trespassing in a place that belongs to the dark. But here is the detail that the documentaries often miss, the part of the story that keeps the town of Atchison quiet. Records from the era of Dr. Finney suggest that Sallie might not have been a random patient. Some whisper that she was his own unacknowledged daughter, the result of a hidden affair. The agony of that betrayal, the sheer weight of that sin, may have acted as a beacon. It didn't just keep Sallie's spirit there, it summoned something else. Something that feeds on the blood of the innocent and the guilt of the father. The entity in the Sallie House isn't a ghost. It is a manifestation of a crime so heinous that the earth itself refused to forget it. And this leads us to the most chilling revelation of all. In 1995, during a final, desperate attempt to cleanse the house, a psychic medium claimed to have made contact with the true Sallie. She described the girl not as a victim, but as a prisoner. She wasn't the one haunting the house. She was being held there by the dark entity as a source of energy. The scratches on Tony weren't just attacks, they were a message. When investigators later translated the patterns of the scratches across Tony's body over several years, they found they weren't random. They were symbols, ancient, pre-Christian markings used to claim a territory. The entity wasn't trying to drive Tony out. It was trying to mark him. It was trying to follow him. The terror of the Sallie House isn't that it's haunted by a girl. The terror is that the girl is just the mask worn by a monster. When the Pickmans left, they thought they were free. But years later, Tony reported that the scratches would still occasionally appear on his back, even hundreds of miles away from Atchison. Once the Sallie House marks you, you belong to it. You are a part of its collection. The house is empty now, standing silent on a quiet street in Kansas. It looks peaceful. It looks ordinary. But if you stand on the sidewalk long enough, you might see a small, pale face in the upstairs window, looking down at you with pleading eyes. And if you're foolish enough to feel sorry for her, if you're foolish enough to want to help, you've already given the entity exactly what it wants, an invitation. But there is one final piece of evidence that surfaced only recently, something that changes everything we thought we knew about that tragic surgery in 1871. A hidden journal belonging to a nurse who assisted Dr. Finney was discovered in an estate sale. In her final entries, she didn't write about a girl dying of appendicitis. She wrote about a girl who was brought in perfectly healthy, a girl who was sacrificed. She described Dr. Finney not as a grieving man, but as a man obsessed with the occult, believing that a life taken in the heart of the home would grant him eternal influence over the town. There was no medical emergency. There was only a ritual. Sallie wasn't a patient. She was an offering. And the thing that came to claim that offering never left. It grew. It bloated on the fear of every family that followed. It isn't just a demon in a house. It is the house. The walls are its skin, the floorboards are its bones, and the basement is its gullet. When you look at the footage of Tony Pickman being scratched, you aren't seeing a ghost attack a man. You are seeing a predator playing with its food. And the most terrifying thought is this: if the house is a living entity fueled by sacrifice, it's been a long time since its last meal. It's waiting for the next person to walk through that door, the next person to listen to the whispers, the next person to believe the lie of the innocent little girl. It's waiting for you. If you ever find yourself in Atchison, Kansas, stay away from 2nd Street. Don't look at the windows. Don't listen for the giggles. Because some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, they are meant to be avoided. The world is full of shadows, and some of them have teeth. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of the Sallie House, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We travel to the darkest corners of the world every week, and you won't want to miss our next investigation. Comment below with the most terrifying place you've ever visited, or tell us if you think you could survive a night in the Sallie House. But be careful what you say. The walls are always listening, and in a house like this, even a comment is an invitation. Stay safe, stay curious, and whatever you do, don't follow the whispers.